Of this world.
Good morning. Good morning. And welcome to our Being Your Own CEO Success Circle. It's intended for solopreneurs. And this morning we're going to be looking at, well, podcasting and what are we listening to and how many people are using it and anything else about podcasting or anything else that we want to discuss. So we'll be right back after this. Well, hello everyone. After an absence of a couple of weeks, this is Loelan, your host, and greetings panel members. I'll be interested to hear what's new with you after our not connecting for a few weeks. So we will, as usual, begin by introducing ourselves, and we'll try and keep our introductions a little bit brief, but we'll say where we are and what we do and anything that's new. So I'll begin by saying that I'm Loelan and I'm in Victoria, British Columbia. I usually forget to say that. And in my coaching and consulting work, I help solopreneurs who want more from their business. Together we overcome that feeling of overwhelm and procrastination and bring that business mastery plan into a joyful reality. So let's see, who shall, well, I'll just try and do it from in the order in which people arrived. So David, how would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Dave Flannery. I'm with Affordable Websites for Small Business and United Country Sauk Valley Realty, Team Flannery, um, where we sell you your property or list it for you and get it sold very quickly. Um, been working really hard trying to set up a studio for YouTubing so I can start doing it for my uh, different ventures. For the more I get involved with things, I'm finding YouTube is very important. So
Mm.
we're going to use it for our real estate business. I'm going to use
Oh.
it for my air fryers,
Mm.
um, and probably affordable websites too. Um, but that's not going to be a major focus on that. It's just going to be where I have my different areas. I'm going to have a video that I've made myself. So
Mm.
getting all ready to set all that up and get used to being in front of a video
Well,
cam. I do it,
you
once a
do,
week
you
usually.
do
So
it here just
yeah,
fine.
yeah, I shouldn't have any problems. I'm a big ham anyway. So and so I also monitor the chat
Hmm.
and help people get their questions answered here through the panel and anything else along that way.
Yes, and just by way of explanation around that, David and I have we figured out how to have another moderator functioning within the YouTube live chat. So that was something that we accomplished in the last while. Hey, David?
Yes, very, and now I can put people in timeout. So be careful in the chat anyway.
So behave yourself.
Yes, we've never had a problem, so I don't think I'll ever use it.
I don't
But
think so.
it's kind of fun to talk about it.
Yeah. So yes, there's. I think that a lot of us are thinking about different ways that we could make use of YouTube. So yeah, thanks. Thanks for being here, David.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So Vivek, you have a brand new um, screen behind you, and you've got. I know you've got some news to share.
Namaste. My name is Vivek Anand. Wake Technology is my company. I'm proud to share my belief with Steve Jobs and Leonardo da Vinci, who said simplicity is the ultimate in sophistication. So I tend to bring different technologies together and make it simple. That's the aim. So the news is, some people might even think that I've moved over to the dark side, but I have started using a Apple Macintosh computer. So setting up a new computer, and that's why you see my virtual screen is out of this world.
I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
What made you switch to Macintosh? Was there something in
Uh,
Windows or
I
just
have not really switched to anything. I continue to have my Windows machine. In fact, that brings me to a very useful, segue into. I'm going to start a new series where I will be talking about 3 different operating systems. 3 in 1, I'm going to call it. So my experience with the Mac OS, my experience with the Windows, and my experience with the Ubuntu, Linux. So 3 things. So I'd be talking about that and creating a series soon. So yeah,
Something like three's the charm.
yeah.
Well, and just in case there are some new people out there watching, I'm aware that there may be one or two new people out there watching. I want to make certain that everybody knows that Vivek certainly can make life simpler for you. He certainly has done that for me. He created well, I guess you would call it sort of a Google product, a combination. We call it Chipmunk. And what it allows me to do is manage invitations and connections for people who want to participate in this success circle. So it's fabulous. It just works so well for me, and it automatically posts things to people's calendars and sends an email, and it's all done with Google products. So works like a hot damn. So
Thank you.
so I'm happy you're here, Vivek, and it's going to be fun to hear more about your 3-in-1. Yeah, right on. So Fred, now I can't remember who came first, Fred or Javita. So Javita,
It was Fred.
It was Fred. Okay, go ahead, Fred.
All right, I may have trouble with my internet. And I might have to switch computers if it becomes a problem. Are you hearing me all right?
Yes, it was a little bit choppy, but it's okay now.
All right, I hope it stays. Otherwise, I'll switch computers if that happens. Well, I'm Fred Jones. I'm also located in Victoria, British Columbia, on Vancouver Island on the west coast of Canada, as is Lowell Ann. I work with young people. I have a group called Our Future Leaders, and I promote online and face-to-face group meetings with young people, help them learn to communicate, become leaders, and improve the world as they become leaders. So I'm really excited about that. Something new that's happened to me is I am in contact with a group out of Spain who have, similar to Toastmasters, but they have just started up a couple years ago, and they're looking at youth programs. So I'm hoping to get involved with them. We're having a meeting, not this Sunday, but next Sunday, and I'll discuss some of the things that
Yeah, I think you're breaking up, Fred. So
do something, or for a week, or I've run a group for 7 years. So I've worked with anything from an hour up to 7 years. And there's different approaches that I've done in the last 15 years. So that I now understand, talking to a few people, that there's very few people who've done that, all the experience I have. So we'll see. And I might go to Portugal because they're having a convention in Portugal in September if this works out. So it'll be interesting. So I'm excited about that. Right. And the other thing that's going to happen is I'm going on a boat cruise again with my friends, my scout friends. And we're leaving on Thursday, coming back on Monday. We go to the Gulf Islands, which are the islands between Vancouver Island and the mainland, British Columbia. It's a highlight of my year. And the funniest thing is, I'm going on a little bit, but it was my daughter's 50th birthday on the young lady at 50 years old who lives in Australia.
Right on.
And her doing that, I went through a lot of photographs, and I found a lot of videos. And I've just been looking this morning at videos from 1971, and some of them are appropriate to the boat cruise. And I'm going to take and show them what happened in 1971 when we were still together. So it's just been a wonderful time. I've got something to look forward to, and I've been looking in the past, which has excited me. So I'm having a great time. I'm really enjoying it.
Right on.
It's wonderful. So I might go to Portugal as well if this,
Yeah.
because they're in 70 countries at the moment. So
Oh my
it means
goodness.
I could have effect in 70 countries if they're interested in what I have to offer.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, and just for everyone's benefit, I too have sailed the Gulf Islands. My husband and I had a 30-foot sailboat, and we sailed around, and it's glorious out there, just glorious. Yeah. Oh dear. So, well, that's good news. Very good news. We'll be interested to hear how all that goes. Right on. So, Javita.
Namaste, all of you. I'm
Namaste.
Shubhangi, and I'm from India. I'm a Reiki master teacher and also a yoga teacher. And nowadays, I'm busy with some of my, one of my student is from France. So I'm busy with teaching her money Reiki and preparing some documents for her. So that's really interesting.
Right on. Wow. And you're in Mumbai.
Yes, I'm from Mumbai.
Yeah, right on. So welcome here, and that's something I didn't do is share. I've started doing a little bit of website development, and actually today I'm meeting with a prospect who may want to have a website developed. So
Wow.
this is kind of fun. So yeah, so it's great to be back after a couple of weeks. And so, interestingly enough, the person who suggested the topic that we were going to talk about this morning was unable to attend this morning. Our friend Alana, who hangs out in Ireland, has company from the States, so she's showing them around Ireland this morning. So hopefully she will catch us on the replay somewhere along the way. So as I began to think about this topic, and I believe that the reason she wanted to raise the topic of podcasts is that apparently the topic has come up within Wealthy Affiliates, and some of us here are also members of that. But as I started thinking about it, I realized that we did one of our shows, or one of our success circles, about podcasting a couple of years ago. So I intended to dig out the link to that, but time got away with technical difficulties this morning. So, I guess the reason it might be useful for us to raise this topic again, I mean, there's a lot of talk online now that YouTube is where we need to be doing videos, we need to be putting videos on our websites and all of that. And that's really, YouTube is really good for a lot of things. But what about podcasting? What are some of the situations where podcasting might be of use from a business perspective and or a personal perspective? But I guess the question I had for all of us is, what are you listening to? Is everything you're doing still television, or have you moved over to YouTube, or are you using listening to podcasts? Where are we all on this? So Fred, I might ask you, because I know that you have been a proponent of podcasts, because you use it while you're doing a workout, a rowing machine workout. So I'm curious to hear who you're listening to and what you get from it.
Okay. Thanks for asking, Lowell. And And as you mentioned, I spend at least an hour, if not longer, on a rowing machine every day. And it's a highlight of my day because there's nothing more boring than sitting on a rowing machine for over an hour a day. That's a big challenge. It's one of the biggest challenges there is with the rowing machine. There's a few others as well, the physical side, but the mental side is that. And I've discovered that I can listen to is of great assistance. One of my favorites that really has led to others is Tim Ferriss. And Tim Ferriss's podcasts, and he's, as you may know, Tim wrote a few books. The 4-Hour Work Week was the first one, The 4-Hour Shift, The 4-Hour Body. And he's got a couple more books now after that series. And the one is called Tools of Titans. And Tools of Titans are the many of the people that he interviewed in his podcast. And he has found that podcasting has helped him enormously personally because he's interested in these people, and now it's helping him I think it saved him because he found writing and still finds writing a challenge, but podcasting he's really done extremely well, and he has a very highly rated podcast. If you look at iTunes and so on, he's always up there, and millions of people listen to him. So that's been a big start. And then because of him, I listened to Cal Fussman.
Fussman,
Fussman. Cal Cal.
Yeah.
Now, Cal Fussman's only been podcasting for probably just over a year, maybe 2 years at the most. Now, Cal was interviewed by Tim Ferriss, and Tim said, "You have such a wonderful background. You should try podcasting." And podcasting has changed Cal's life, from what I understand. Now, Cal has worked for Esquire magazine for decades and interviewed many, many people for Esquire magazine, like Gorbachev, many of the world leaders, many interesting people in the world. And he's written articles, but he used those interviewing skills to write articles on podcasting. And he asked, the secret is asking good questions. And of course, Cal Fussman knows how to ask good questions.
Right.
But Cal, who's only been an author all his life, writer for originally Esquire for at least a decade or maybe even 2 decades. It's now got him to start his own business, to tell stories, and he's selling that. And it's interesting to listen to Cal because not only does he have interesting interviews, but he uses some of the tips that he gets and explains where he is in life. It's all new to him. He's never had to sell anything in his life. Now he's had to learn marketing and sales and starting his own business to help companies become good at storytelling. And he's setting himself very tough goals, financial goals. And he's saying, I have never done this in my life. And the people he interviews help him as well. So they're interesting interviews, and it's interesting to listen to how Cal is changing his life because of podcasting. So it's really an interesting one, which I never would have found if it wasn't for Tim Ferriss. And the other area that I listen to is, believe it or not, Australian Broadcasting Corporation, because I do spend some time in Australia. And somebody suggested to me there's a radio program it's called ABC instead of CBC, because we have Canadian Broadcasting. This is the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Right. And they interview someone almost at least 5 days a week. And it's called Conversations. And there's 2 interviewers, Richard Fiedler, F-I-D, I think it's F-I or F-I-E-D, I'm not sure. I think it's F-I-D. It looks like Fiddler, but he pronounces it Fiedler, F-I-D-L-E-R. And the other person who does the interviews is Sarah Kanowski. I think it's K-A-N-O-W-S-K-I, Kanowski. And they interview some very interesting people, often Australians, but they interview other people as well. For example, you'll get a view of what Australians think about China and what Australians think about the United States and where they fit into the hierarchy. And it's fascinating to hear another worldly point of view about what's going on in the world, in the United States. They interview Americans, and some of them are very fascinating interviews. Some of them are very local to Australia, but it's also very worldly. And I find it a breath of fresh air rather than just listening to North American points of view. I find that interesting. And they're good interviewers. So, and they're about 40 minutes.
Okay. And so, from a business perspective, I mean, what you just shared with us earlier about your connection with somebody in Portugal and the possibility of going there and so forth. So being able to connect up with various other world views is a real advantage from a business perspective.
Yes.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Oh, those are the main ones. I listen to others because, they're like Tim Ferriss is only once a week. Cal Fussman is only once a week. Conversations is almost daily, so I can always flick in that. I listen to TED Talks as well, so I fill in the gaps because I row 6 days a week, and there's not enough podcasts from Tim Ferriss, Cal, a few other places to fill them out. I'm getting notice my internet connection is unstable, so
yeah,
if
it's
getting
a little
bad, let me know.
It's a little it did fluctuate a little bit. So thank you so much for that. So again, from the perspective of our being in business, etc., there are times when being able to listen to something, I guess, while we're doing something else, is a really, really interesting thing. So, and I might share that one of the podcasts that I've just started listening to is Steve Dotto's Gray Matters, he calls it. And I think he's listed under Dotto Tech. And he's a local from Vancouver, a local person who's been doing a lot of broadcasting in YouTube, but he has started up this podcast where he's focusing on our age group and all the things that they might like to be doing in their third age. So that's been like I've just finally found that and thought it would be interesting to hear what he has to say. The other one that I was interested in is Michael Hyatt's Lead to Win. And he talks about leadership and business, etc. So those are two that I've started listening to. But I have to say that I listen to the radio a lot. So whenever I've got something that isn't online, I listen to CBC radio, and they do some similar things to what you were describing, Fred, from the ABC network. So you can get lots of podcasts that way. So it really is interesting to stay on top of all those different worldviews. So, David, what about you? What are you listening to right now? You're muted.
I hit unmute and I must have been unmuted and didn't realize it.
Yeah.
I listen to TV and radio and YouTube. I'm a big fan of YouTube. I do anytime I have a question or I want to solve a problem, and it doesn't matter whether it's website, cars, planting replanting something in the lawn. I do my research on YouTube most of the time. I find that it's easier to watch than it is to read. Unfortunately, getting lazy in my old age, and I should read more than what I do. but I do enjoy getting the information from video as opposed to the other way.
Mm.
And so I've joined that group. I have tried to start listening to podcasts a couple different times, and it's never taken.
Mm.
I usually when I'm building websites, I'm listening to this one website. Let me see if I can bring it up real quick. That brain.fm.
Oh, yes.
I use that a lot for when I'm wanting to concentrate and work and not be interrupted. Otherwise, I'm have the TV on in the background and usually it's a baseball game or a football game or a soccer game or something like that I don't have to pay attention to. So then I can work. But like when something exciting happens, I can turn and look up and see what happened. And I've got a DVR, so I can roll it back, 2 minutes and watch for 2 minutes and then go back to work again. But I get my information off of the news. We listen to probably 3 or 4 different types of news. We listen to the ABC and NBC. They're more liberal, and then I try to listen to Fox, but it just drives me crazy. It really does. I'm not a liberal. I'm more of a conservative. I'm a moderate, but I will tell you that I'm not, extreme one way or the other. But just hearing them just bothers the heck out of me. At least ABC and NBC tend to try to look like they're neutral. If you know what I mean. They're not.
Yeah.
They seem to just give you the news and then you can make your own mind. Now I will agree there sometimes it's slanted and they choose the stories and whatnot, but it's not as bad, near as bad as what you get when you watch Fox. So, and if I could find a conservative place that just gave me the news, I would go to that too.
Right.
I'd really like to do that, And it's usually TV that we're watching. I probably when I'm in the car, it's sports, and I don't have the ability in my cars to be able to listen to podcasts, or I'd probably do podcasts in there.
Yeah.
My new vehicle will allow me to do that, so I will. Once I get it back from the repairman, I will.
You set that up.
Yeah, be able to set that up. So.
Interesting. So you're still watching TV?
Yeah.
Which I gave TV up years ago. Everything I watch is online.
I don't know whether you noticed, Llewellyn, Nathan has joined a while ago. So.
Oh no, I didn't notice. Well, welcome, Nathan. There you are. Nathan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you know, my name is Nathan. I'm here from Mexico. Live in a small town called Boredom. It's just north of Puerto Vallarta on the coast. House sitting here for 6 months. And my thing is I returned to the publishing world, and my goal is helping business people position themselves as a go-to person, the trusted authority in their niche. That's what I do by writing the book.
Right.
Got the book part.
Well, I'm glad you're here, Nathan, and I need to apologize. I'm trying to focus on your while you were speaking. My Zoom is not changing scene. So I apologize for that, because in the video it's going to show my face and your voice.
Nathan, if you could turn your mic up a little bit, it would be, if that's possible. You're a little soft.
Right on. So, Vivek, what about you? What are you listening to? I think I can probably guess a little bit, but
As such, I don't listen to podcasts because I don't see the point of a podcast, really, to be honest.
Oh.
In the sense, unless I'm doing a mechanical job which doesn't need my brain to be engaged in the job that I'm doing, and my brain can do something else. Only in that case. But I do listen to audiobooks. I do listen to I do listen to Sadhguru as such. He was interviewed a couple of days ago, maybe longer than that, by BBC. So, and that was I felt it was a good. It wasn't really an interview, but anyway. I mainly listen to audiobooks. I am a subscriber to Audible, so I listen to different books by different authors rather than sit and read them. Listen to them because most of them are in the voice of the author, so that makes it all the more easy to understand what they actually mean, rather than just read the text and try to understand them.
So, and Vivek has shared with me a number of those Sadhguru videos, and he's well worth watching and listening to. He has a spiritual approach, but he has a very good sense of humor, and he also has a very kind of realistic approach. He speaks about spirituality, but it's not way out there in the clouds. It's kind of very down to earth and very practical. In fact, he calls it inner engineering.
Yeah. In that BBC talk, he mentioned a fact that he has found. He found that most of the traffic on the internet, 70% or more, is actually pornography.
Really?
Yes, and he was saying this. If that's the case, he was saying, if that's the case, I need to be there instead of the pornography. Let people listen to me.
Right. Yeah.
And he mentioned a funny situation where he was walking down the road somewhere in Bangalore, and two teenage boys came running towards him saying, "Sadhguru, Sadhguru, Sadhguru." And he asked him, how do you know me? And they said, because they watched his videos, and he was saying, in their age, for someone to listen to anything spiritual, it was impossible at when he's in his teenage years. But he is bringing that. He brings the business, environment, health, everything. He's not just talking about spirituality. No, he talks about life. He talks about everything. So
yes, I was really impressed with that interview or that discussion he had about global warming and the environment. I've forgotten the name of the person that he was discussing it with, but I found it very interesting and very worthwhile. So, yeah. But when you say you don't see the point of podcasting, I can mention to everyone that I've noticed one person who makes really, really good use of it, of podcasting from a business perspective, is Mayanna Stevens or Stevenson. She has a blog that she I think she posts it every Tuesday, and so within the text she always embeds a podcast, so that I mean she has the text of what she's talking about is there if you want to read it, but if you want to hear it as well, you can do it. So it's there's always a podcast included, and of course then the other thing she does is on the same day, I think in the evening, she does a YouTube live as well. So she's making use of everything going. So and I have to say that even sometimes when I'm reading, it's helpful to have her voice there talking about it. First of partly because she's so animated and so upbeat energy, etc. But she talks about everything about WordPress. She supports people who are doing websites, etc., etc. So she stays on top of a lot of very useful technical online information. So I have to say that I find her work useful from a business perspective. Yeah.
Can I make a suggestion, please?
Yes.
Like to get some links in chat so we can go to these places to different people as we go along. Thank you.
So I have a huge. Wait now. I will post that for everybody. Yeah. So it's really interesting that some of us need utter silence when we're working, and some of us need something to do while we're listening to something else. I know for myself, when I'm listening to the radio on Sunday, there are a couple of programs that I really like a lot. I'm listening to the radio, and there I am, playing solitaire on my phone, just because I'm listening. I'm preoccupied listening. So,
I do listen to audio books. It's just that I haven't gotten podcasts or because podcasts, one or two I did listen to. They were more of a talk show kind of thing, and I felt that it would be better if I watch the video, maybe YouTube video, which the same thing is discussed, rather than simply listen to what that person is saying. So in a podcast.
So I just put a link into Mayanna's latest item. I hope I'm spelling her name right. That would be awful if I did that wrong.
Could I mention something about podcasting that while you're doing that? The fact that you mentioned Mayanna uses it for her business, that's always a thought. How could we use it in our businesses? Now, one person who comes to mind who I know has systematized it, I think is maybe the right word, is Dean Jackson. Dean, I find him interesting, but a bit of a challenging, because he uses an enormous amount of filler words. And sometimes it is too much for me. However, his approach, I think, is something worth mentioning. And I don't know exactly how he does it, because it is worth finding out. But he does quite a few podcasts in a week. In other words, he has a couple one that's called More Cheese and Less Whiskers. And that's on one topic.
More.
And that's his own. More
Oh.
Cheese and Less Whiskers. He's about marketing. He's a marketing guru.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And what Dean Jackson has worked his life that he tries to make it very easy and simple.
Mm-hmm.
His podcast, when he does More Cheese and Less Whiskers, is normally someone who's running a small business or even a large business who wants to improve their marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So he talks to them and they say, this is my problem. I need more customers, or I've got this kind of business. And that's what he's doing. And that's what Dean Jackson likes doing. So when you listen to a podcast, he's actually marketing his skills of being able to help people with their businesses and their marketing, because you're actually listening to in real time, making some wonderful suggestions about how they can improve their business marketing. And he's never really discussed this with the person before, but he has a formula that he's developed over the years, and it's called 8 Profit Activators. And he says, okay, you're working on this particular one. You need to do some post sales to keep your customers happy and bring them back. And he goes through the 8 profit. But he only maybe talks about today you only need to find new clients, or now you've got the clients, how are you going to deal with them? So there's all these 8 different stages. He doesn't go through 8 every time.
No.
He'll just pick one of them for this and say, this is what you're working on now, and this is how you can do it. He has many techniques. So that podcast, though, where he helps the person, sells his abilities. But what he really makes no money on the podcast, but he does have other services that he can offer them. He has a 90-minute book, because he often says part of your marketing is if you have a book, and he has this 90-minute book where it's a service where you actually talk and discuss with the people on the 90-minute book, and they'll create a book for you, even if it's only a few 20, 30 pages, but at least it's a marketing tool. You can say, here's my knowledge about that. So he has all of those. So he sells that. But he also, one of the things he loves doing is he has these intimate groups of people around the world that he goes every year, and he'll go to Australia once or twice a year. He lives in Florida. He's originally from Canada, so he goes to Toronto at least once a year. He goes to London and maybe Amsterdam. And he organizes in a hotel, probably maybe up to 10 people. And what does he do for them? Exactly what he does on the podcast.
Oh.
But he knows intimately. They bring their marketing problems to him, and in a couple days they do, and he charges, I don't know, I think it's $5,000 or more per person.
Wow.
So he might have 10 people, so it's $50,000 that he's earning for that. But he's so knowledgeable and so skilled in this. So and then also what he does, so that markets that. And it's but he does other things as well. But the podcast is so organized that he just interviews people. He sets up who he's having the meeting with on More Cheese and Less Whiskers. And then he sends out, he uses that to send out emails about that subject, what they've done. And it's all organized, including transcripts. So he doesn't do it himself. He has people behind the scenes doing it. So all he does is interview and make those suggestions, and then all the rest goes on. So it's a whole system. His podcast has become a very powerful marketing tool for all the services he offers.
Okay.
So that's something, if you as a client or as a solopreneur thinking, can I use podcasts? That's maybe a look at the way he does it. Maybe there's something that works for you in your business to get the word out. Now, it's not a quick fix. It's not that I start doing podcasts, and you have to do it regularly. Every week he has the More Cheese and Less Whiskers.
The
Can't
consistency.
just do 1 or 2 or 3.
Yeah. The consistency is really important. Yeah.
Without that, it's not. So it's not something you just jump into and say, oh, I'd like to do it because Dean Jackson makes a lot of money out of it, or anyone else who's doing it for their business, like Meehan as well. But I'm sure she's as consistent as normal, and her topic, and she's helpful, and you say, oh, I'd like to deal with her. It's a great marketing tool in certain instances. It's not just a thing to, I'm going to do a podcast and I'm going to become successful. No. but it's a great tool. And I see that Dean Jackson is one person who definitely uses it.
So another, I mean, this is just another way of saying the same thing as you just said, Fred, but it's effective if it's part of an overall strategy.
Yes.
Wow.
So now, and I just thought, because you mentioned Mian does that, and
Yeah.
and there are other people, but we might, as solopreneurs, we're thinking, is that something I should do? Well, yes and no. If it's right,
Yeah.
yes. No, if it's just I think, well,
Yeah.
you have to have a plan and a reason for doing it, and if you do, it can be very powerful.
So, but for all of us, it requires figuring out the technology that we need to use in order to use it. And I'm very much aware that there are some platforms where you can actually go in and do something like we're doing here, and also record that. I believe in Zoom, actually. If I had been recording this, then when the Zoom is over, it will upload a video file and an MP3. So there's one way that you can do it, but then what do you do with it? So it has.
I think there's even services now that will help you with podcasting if you want. But again, it's like everything. Unless you have a reason for doing it and a method and it's part of a system that's going to do some benefit to you and others, or whatever your goal is. Maybe it's just to help others, but if you want to, and that's not a bad goal, but you also want to maybe monetize it ultimately, because it can end up costing you money.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
To anybody really. I'm not directing it to anybody specific. When you say podcast, should that when you want to create a podcast, should it be created as a podcast itself, or is it okay to have a presentation or something like that? Like for example, if you create a video to go on YouTube, and then you extract the audio of that, you can potentially have that as a podcast.
Of course you can.
Yes.
So,
yes,
which is the best way?
Yeah,
Which is the best way?
There isn't necessarily a best way. I mean, if you do a video, you might be using, well, you could use YouTube or some other way of doing the video. Facebook Live, you could do the video using Zoom, like we are on right now. You could use BeLive TV, you could use OBS. And then with the recording, you could simply use a program like Camtasia Studio, load it up, strip out the audio, and then use that for a podcast. So you use the video that you've created for YouTube and other channels. You could use it on Facebook. You could use it on a website. And stripping out the audio, no big deal at all. It just takes a little bit of time, and then you've got it for a podcast too. So it's just maximizing the spread of your content.
The one suggestion that if you're going to do a video, you need to make sure you're not relying on the video portion of it too much, that you need to explain things well enough that you don't need the video behind you to do the explanation.
Yeah, that's a valid
like
point.
if you were building a website, it would be a very difficult podcast. You click on something like that. But if you were doing just an informational video, like if I was doing my air fryers, I could do a podcast with that. Is that I'm not going to have my reviews of the air fryers. I can just go through and say this part of it's good, this part of it's bad, this, and so forth and so on. And I don't need video behind me to explain it. So that would work very well.
Yeah, it's true. If you use a process that involves visuals, then a podcast wouldn't be the best approach unless you could talk about whatever these visuals are without actually needing them on screen. If you need them on screen, the podcast will be a bust. This will work. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, so it's again, as Fred suggested, it all has to be part of a strategy, and you need to know exactly what your strategy is and where everything is going to end up.
I met a lady that who does real estate, and she was teaching a class about how to do stuff, and she has it set up where she does a video, and she does it in a blog style video. She has that, once that's done, that automatically, they strip the sound out. That becomes a podcast. They automatically convert that to text, and then they read through that text, and it becomes their blog. And then at that point, those little portions of it become their Twitter feed, their Facebook, and all of that, and it's all done automatically.
Wow.
And she says it takes her 2 hours, and most of the time is the video, to get what she needs to do a decent blog and get it onto get it in all those different formats, which was amazing to me. And I have to go back to her class again to go through it, because she was using all sorts of different. She was using Evernote to do it. She was using all sorts of different programming that I tried to start setting it up, and it's a little more difficult. It sounds real easy. It's a little more difficult than what it
Yeah.
is. And,
Well, of course, David, the other thing is, yeah, she may have said that she can do that podcast or that video in an hour or whatever, but in order for it to be good content, there's a lot of time and energy and research and thinking that goes into that before you even start.
Yeah, I would agree with that too.
Yeah. Viv, I was just going to Jafita. What about you? What sorts of things are you listening to or watching?
Actually, I'm more into YouTube. I listen sometimes podcast, especially of Alex. You may be knowing he's a W member, and he's doing a fantastic podcasting, and I get a lot of knowledge from his podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So that is more about affiliate marketing. But in general, I listen YouTube only. That's a very good source of information, research.
Mm-hmm. Sure is. Yeah. So I have to admit that I watch a lot of YouTubes. I don't always watch everything to the very end, though. But it's I mean within Wealthy Affiliate, just recently, Jay has been covering how to set up your YouTube channel and how to optimize, etc. And the approach that he seems to have been taking is that if you have a website or a blog and you are doing a YouTube, then you cross-pollinate back and forth. So you embed the video on your website, but the way he presents it is that by doing that you get much more what he calls Google juice in the whole search thing. But of course we all know that YouTube is the second most used search engine. So yeah, so it's
really very tough regarding affiliate marketing, and it does not allow you to post affiliate links directly on the YouTube channel or in the description.
Yeah, you have to be careful. You have to be careful how you do that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's certainly a good source of traffic.
Mm-hmm.
You can post your links into YouTube, and also you can embed your YouTube videos on your blog.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a two-way traffic way.
Mm-hmm. Works both ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it does take some planning and a strategy and to be able to think through the whole process. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? So Nathan, what have you been listening to lately? I know you're online a lot in a lot of different places.
I haven't been, not podcasts,
No?
despite the fact that I used to work as a host for a podcast. So, but I didn't actually listen to them. I mean, I'm looking. What's been happening lately is I've been meeting people and winding up listening to them as a result of different so-called sales calls.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yesterday was a case in point, a huge turning point in what I'm doing. By winding up on a number of different calls, interactions with people. So it wasn't podcast or anything like that. It's just different interactions with people, different appointments. And winding up like yesterday was just a tremendous amount of knowledge that completely changed my thinking.
Mm.
And so it's extremely beneficial, but it came about through marketing. Using LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and it didn't come from a podcast. What's been happening is I've been getting unexpected knowledge bites coming into my life in different ways as a result of living in that way, as opposed to. I mean, if I'm looking for stuff, but I wouldn't be looking through a podcast. I'm not a regular listener of anything. I used to be, but not anymore. I mean, where everything changed, like I used to listen to music regularly when I was doing my work, mostly instrumental. Everything changed the day I got robbed and lost my entire music collection.
Oh.
Lost my bass guitar, lost a lot of computer stuff as well. And it flipped a switch in my mind, and after that I couldn't listen to music during working anymore. That was quite a number of years ago. At one point I was able to get back into music for a while, but never in the same way. And I just I don't know why, but it changed something inside me, and it also did other things, unexpected things that like it took off all my jewelry and never wore it again.
Right.
Took off my watch, never wore it again. It did some really strange things, and I have no idea why. So.
Well, I mean, David mentioned using Brain FM as a musician and a choir member. Even if the music is instrumental, I find it distracting because the patterns in the music.
Bingo.
I get drawn into the patterns in the music, and then I lose track of what I'm doing.
It happens to me too. And I was going to go there. You beat me to it. But yeah, that's the other after effect that happened is I couldn't listen to music anymore while I was working because it would interfere with my thinking patterns. It would interfere with my ability to concentrate, even if it was just instrumental. Just couldn't do it. After that, I work in silence. So some people have gotten really upset with me. They're going, "What do you mean? This must be something wrong with you." And I'm going, "No, it's the way things are now, And you don't like it, that's not my problem,
Yeah. But I have used Brain FM because they have 3 different approaches. One of them is for concentration, one of them is for sleep, and I forget what the other one is. Maybe somebody. But the concentration, relaxation. Thank you. So I've never used it for sleep, but I certainly have used it for concentration, and it works for me because it doesn't have a musical pattern.
Interesting. Okay, well, I'll have a look.
Yeah, it's worth exploring. Yeah.
Well, the only other stuff I've done, but it's not again, really listening to a podcast is just tuning into, different meditation things. But I would only listen to something like that when it's not working.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
if I'm working, it's going to mess me up, guaranteed.
Right. Absolutely. So, what is it? There is a time for everything under heaven.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, after that thing happened, it just
Yeah.
permanently, or seemed to permanently change things.
Mm-hmm.
But prior to that, there was a lot more music in my life. But after that, just something in me switched off.
Well, I'm the first one to say we need music in our lives. I couldn't. I don't think I could function without having music in my life. But when I'm doing music, I'm totally focused on it. So
Sure.
it's not a sort of a background thing.
Well, I mean, if there's music going on, it's because I'm taking a time out and I'm really enjoying a lot of the music videos. Like many of the ones that I've been able to watch now are things that I really wanted to see years ago
Yeah.
that were not easily available because of the times that we lived in. But now everything's online. There's so many things, and it's been possible to access things.
Well,
that
and isn't it wonderful that all these artists that you can access through YouTube that we in the past we wouldn't have been able to. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Well, and some of this stuff is kind of obscure, like some of the music I was listening to when I was a kid, or well, not a kid, but in my early 20s. For example, a band called Santers out of Calgary. It's a really, really good band. And the lead guitarist went on he was recruited by Rick Emmett to play with Triumph because he was so good. But he never got the recognition that I felt he deserved. He was an awesome guitar player and singer. So I don't know, but the videos and all these things from earlier in their career are now available on YouTube, and you can watch some of these really excellent videos of him doing stuff. But he's still, in my opinion, relatively unknown, even though he's extremely good. But that goes to show something else, which you can be extremely talented and skilled and still be an absolute dud because you don't know how to market yourself.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's another story.
That is another story and another
I know
topic.
how that feeling is.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm a star or anything, but I know how it feels to
I mean,
be able to market yourself.
well, I've run into this thing repeatedly with different writers, and many of them have huge entitlement complex and the idea that if I'm a great writer, I'm going to be successful in doing story. That isn't so. You don't know how to market yourself. Doesn't matter how good you are. You could be the best in the world and still be an absolute failure. And I've had some major tiffs with some of these writers who tell me I'm crazy. I'm going, well, okay, keep believing what you wish and stay broke.
Yeah. Wow. So, let's see. I think I'm looking at the top of the hour here, and I think I've shared everything that I have been listening to and exposing myself to. And I mean, we find ways of accessing information that is useful to us when we need something, etc., etc. And we can find things that can relieve our boredom when we're doing something repetitive that doesn't require the brain. So I guess it all sort of boils down to the fact that with the various things that we do, there are different platforms that lend themselves to that, and as business people, we have to, getting back to the marketing thing, if we think about who our prospective clients are, and to think about what they might be interested in and what they might be doing at any given point in a week or a day or whatever. So it all has to be part of our broad strategic thinking. So Fred, are you still there? We're at the 5-minute point, but I always like to give you the final word.
I really appreciate it, Lowell. I think if I look back at when I started listening to podcasts, as I said, I do listen to when I'm rowing, but all of a sudden I hear something and I stop and I make a note of it. Say, that's a good idea. And I have gained enormous amount of ideas, and they're not just those podcasts. Sometimes it's something that I never thought would be relevant to what I'm doing. But that's why I try and listen to some eclectic, like TED Talks. You just never know what you're going to get. And I listened to one the other day, and it just said, wow, I would never have listened to this normally, but I had 15 minutes, so let me play that one, and I learned something. So I think that has been the benefit to me of listening. I have learned so much about business, about life, by listening to podcasts. It's a wonderful way to get educated, in my opinion. I have learned more probably from podcasts in the past few years than anything I ever in my whole life. It's just been amazing what you can garner. So and I don't watch television like you. I do not show on the television, even if there's one in the room that I'm staying in. I can go for months without looking at a TV, but definitely podcast and YouTube. So that's what I would say. There's an enormous amount of benefits watching, and business-wise, if you see how you could get out to your audience. Like Dean Jackson, to me, does wonderful things with his podcasting because his preparation is nil. He already, for 20 or 30 years, he knows all about marketing, and he can just help people by, he's already prepared. He doesn't have to sit down and, write a script. So those are the techniques that can possibly benefit us. It benefits us listening, I find enormously. So I find this so interesting topic because I've learned so much.
I love that you brought that out. That by doing that, you get you get ideas that you can use in other ways. Good point. So I think it's time for us to close. Does anybody have a parting comment that they want to make before we do? I see everybody shaking their heads, so I'm going to just hit